Every year, Americans spend over $200 billion on meat. Every year, health researchers quietly publish studies confirming that some of the most protein-dense foods on Earth are not in the butcher's case. They're growing in gardens, floating in ponds, rising from dry soil in places where meat was never an option. Today, we're counting down 12 plants with protein content that rivals or exceeds common animal sources. And these aren't just nutritional curiosities. Scripture mentions several of them by name. Ancient physicians prescribed them. Warriors carried them on campaigns. And modern researchers are now confirming what traditional cultures never doubted. Pay attention to number 1. It's something most people in the Western world have walked past 100 times without any idea they were looking at one of the most complete proteins nature produces. And around number 7, I'm going to tell you the story of a man in a desert, no food, no water, no will to continue, whose survival came down to a single plant-based meal prepared in a very specific way. That story matters. Not just spiritually, physiologically. Let's count down. Number 12. Green peas. The garden protein scripture scribes would have recognized. You probably think of green peas as the vegetable you pushed around your plate as a child. But the legume family, to which peas belong, is mentioned throughout the ancient Near East as a staple of survival and sustenance. Ezekiel 4:9, one of the most nutritionally specific passages in all of Scripture, instructs the prophet to make bread from a blend that includes lentils, beans, and other field crops, a recipe that modern nutritionists have analyzed and found to be a remarkably complete protein source. Peas would have grown alongside those crops in the same soil. Ancient Egyptians cultivated peas as far back as 4,800 years ago. Greek and Roman physicians documented them as a food for sustaining physical labor. In China, the pea was considered a symbol of prosperity, specifically because it was filling, durable, and productive, the ancient world's version of a reliable protein budget. One cooked cup of green peas delivers approximately 9 grams of protein. What makes that number significant is not just the quantity, but the quality. Pea protein contains all 9 essential amino acids, the building blocks the body cannot manufacture on its own and must obtain through food. This is genuinely unusual among plant proteins. Most plant sources are deficient in 1 or 2 essential amino acids, which means the body can't. Peas are an exception. Laboratory analysis of pea protein isolate shows a PDCAS score, the protein digestibility corrected amino acid score, that approaches 0.89, where 1 point represents the theoretical maximum. That places pea protein closer to egg white than to most other vegetables. Fresh or frozen peas, lightly steamed at temperatures below 85 degrees Celsius, retain their full amino acid profile and their naturally occurring lectins at non-problematic levels. Extended boiling degrades both the protein structure and the chlorophyll content, which is why the color goes from vibrant green to military drab, and why Grandma's boiled peas never quite felt like a superfood. The sweet spot, steam for 4 to 6 minutes, serve with a light drizzle of cold-pressed olive oil. What the ancient world understood intuitively is what agriculture researchers now confirm. Peas don't just feed you. They fix atmospheric nitrogen back into the soil, making the ground more productive for whatever you plant next. They were never just food. They were infrastructure. Number 11. Brussels sprouts. The cruciferous protein that outperforms beef per calorie. The Book of Numbers describes the Israelites in the wilderness longing for the foods of Egypt: cucumbers, melons, leeks, onions, garlic. The cruciferous family wasn't named explicitly, but wild mustard relatives grew throughout the Levant and were consumed by every major civilization in the ancient Mediterranean. Roman writers, including Pliny the Elder, dedicated serious attention to cultivated brassicas as medicine and food, and physicians in ancient Greece considered them remedies for muscle fatigue and inflammation. In traditional Ayurvedic medicine, brassica family plants were prescribed specifically for what practitioners called rebuilding after depletion, that framing maps onto what we now understand as muscle protein synthesis. 1 cup of cooked Brussels sprouts delivers approximately 4 grams of protein at only 56 calories. That protein-to-calorie ratio surpasses most cuts of beef, where protein is accompanied by significantly higher caloric density. But the more compelling finding is in the phytochemistry. Brussels sprouts contain sulforaphane, a compound formed when the vegetable's cellular walls are disrupted, either by chewing, chopping, or lightly steaming. Research published in peer-reviewed oncology and metabolic journals suggests that sulforaphane activates NRF2, a protein that triggers the body's own antioxidant production. Athletes who consume cruciferous vegetables regularly in clinical trials showed measurably reduced markers of exercise-induced oxidative stress, meaning faster recovery between training sessions. The preparation window matters here. Chop or shred Brussels sprouts and let them sit for 5 to 10 minutes before applying any heat. This waiting period allows the enzyme myrosinase, which activates sulforaphane, to complete its conversion. Adding heat too quickly deactivates the enzyme before the conversion is complete, and you lose a significant portion of the benefit. After resting, roast at 200 degrees Celsius for 18 to 20 minutes. The outer leaves will caramelize. That slightly bitter, nutty edge is what sulforaphane activation smells like. Cultures that didn't have clinical trials found the same thing through centuries of careful observation. They knew these plants helped bodies recover. The mechanism was invisible to them. Number 10. Asparagus. The perennial protein with a 2,000-year track record. Asparagus appears in Egyptian hieroglyphics as early as 3000 BCE, depicted as an offering of value, not a common vegetable, but a distinguished one. The Greeks and Romans cultivated it extensively, with Cato the Elder providing specific cultivation instructions in his agricultural writings around 200 BCE. Roman emperors reportedly kept special fleets, the asparagus fleet, to rapidly transport harvests before they lost peak freshness. That kind of institutional investment signals something beyond culinary preference. In traditional Persian medicine, asparagus root preparations were prescribed for kidney restoration and what ancient texts described as rebuilding vital essence. In China, Asparagus racemosus, a relative, was categorized as a premier tonic herb for restoration. Asparagus delivers approximately 4.5 grams of protein per cooked cup, along with folate, vitamin K, and an unusual amino acid called asparagine, named after the plant itself, because asparagus was where scientists first isolated it in 1806. Asparagine plays a role in protein metabolism and nervous system function. Research has also documented high levels of protodiosine in asparagus, a steroidal saponin that some clinical studies suggest may support natural testosterone levels in men, with results researchers consider worth exploring further in larger trials. The preparation insight most people miss. Asparagus stems lose moisture and bioactive compounds within hours of harvest. Traditional cultivation advice, eat it the day you cut it, wasn't mere culinary snobbery. It was nutritional accuracy. If you're working with market asparagus, stand the stems upright in an inch of cold water in the refrigerator. Cut ends submerged like flowers in a vase. This preserves the cellular integrity for 2 to 3 additional days. Steam rather than boil, 4 to 5 minutes only, until the spears are bright green and just yielding to a fork. Asparagus is a perennial. Plant it once, tend it for 2 years before harvesting, and it returns every spring for up to 20 years. The ancients understood investments that paid across generations. Asparagus is one of them. Number 9. Artichokes. The Mediterranean protein that improves how your body uses everything else. The artichoke Sonara scolimus is descended from the wild cardoon that ancient Egyptians cultivated and traded as a luxury food. Greek myth held that artichokes were born from a woman transformed by Zeus into a plant of extraordinary value. Whether or not you accept the mythology, the cultivation record is unambiguous. Artichokes were considered prestigious enough to be restricted to the wealthy and educated classes in ancient Rome. The Arabic medical tradition, specifically Ibn Sina's Canon of Medicine, completed around 1025 CE. That framing wasn't symbolic. What Ibn Sina observed clinically was that people who consumed artichokes regularly seemed to absorb nutrition from their other foods more efficiently. He was right. Artichokes contain cynarin and silymarin, 2 bitter compounds concentrated in the leaves and stem that stimulate bile production and improve digestive function. Bile is essential for breaking down fats and fat-soluble proteins. A body with well-functioning bile production absorbs protein more completely from everything it eats. 1 medium artichoke contains approximately 4.5 grams of protein alongside 10 grams of fiber. But the compounding effect on whole diet protein absorption may matter as much as the direct contribution. To prepare artichokes in a way that preserves these bitter compounds, avoid extended boiling in large volumes of water. Steam instead, or roast halved artichokes face down with olive oil at 190 degrees Celsius for 35 minutes. Add a squeeze of lemon during cooking. The citric acid slows oxidation and preserves the pale green color that signals the bioactive compounds are intact. The Mediterranean world didn't have biochemistry labs. They had generations of careful observation about which foods made other foods work better. Artichokes earned their prestigious status through results, not reputation. Number 8. Amaranth. The sacred grain that empires tried to erase. Here is where the history becomes extraordinary. In Genesis and throughout the Torah, grain offerings were central to worship and covenant. While wheat and barley were the named grains, trade routes through ancient Mesoamerica didn't exist, but the principle of grain as sacred substance, as something worthy of ceremony and offering, appears in cultures thousands of miles apart with no recorded contact. The Aztec Empire built amaranth into the center of both its food supply and its spiritual practice. Tamales made from amaranth were shaped into divine figures during religious festivals. When Hernán Cortés arrived and began dismantling Aztec power structures, one of his first decrees was the prohibition of amaranth cultivation, punishable by death. He understood what modern nutritionists have confirmed: control the protein supply, and you control the people. The Aztecs didn't consider amaranth sacred because of tradition. They considered it sacred because it kept them alive and strong. One cooked cup of amaranth delivers approximately 9 grams of complete protein, all 9 essential amino acids, including lysine, which is notably deficient in most grain crops. Lysine is critical for muscle repair and calcium absorption. The lack of lysine in wheat is one reason bread-centric diets historically produce populations with lower muscle mass than legume and grain combinations. Amaranth solves the lysine problem that wheat cannot. Research has isolated a peptide called leucine in amaranth, originally discovered in soy, that some laboratory studies suggest may inhibit inflammatory pathways at the cellular level. The science on leucine is early stage, but results are consistent enough to sustain continued investigation. To cook amaranth and maximize its protein bioavailability, use a 1:2.5 ratio with water. Bring to a boil, reduce immediately to a low simmer, cover and cook for 20 minutes without lifting the lid. The result is a porridge-like grain with a slightly earthy, nutty flavor and a texture that holds up in both sweet and savory preparations. Soaking overnight and rinsing before cooking reduces phytic acid content, which further improves mineral and protein absorption. The Aztecs built one of the most formidable civilizations in human history on this grain. It survived the attempt to eradicate it. It's still here. That persistence is itself worth noting. Number 7. Lentils. The protein that saved a prophet and may have saved civilization. Open 1 Kings chapter 19. Read what it says slowly. Elijah has just called down fire from heaven in front of 450 prophets of Baal. He has won an extraordinary confrontation. And then a single death threat from Queen Jezebel sends him running into the wilderness. He collapses under a broom tree, exhausted, dehydrated, spiritually shattered, and asks God to let him die. I have had enough, he says. Take my life. What happens next is not a sermon. It's not a vision. It's a meal. An angel touches him and says, "Arise and eat," and Elijah looks, and there beside his head is a cake baked on hot coals and a jar of water. He eats. He drinks. He lies back down. The angel returns a second time. Arise and eat, because the journey is too great for you. The Hebrew word for the cake described, uga, refers specifically to a flat bread made from ground legumes and grain, a food common to wilderness travelers in that region. Nutritional researchers who have analyzed the ancient preparation of similar flatbreads from that period find they would have included ground lentils or dried beans. That isn't just poetry. That's a specific delivery mechanism for branched-chain amino acids, complex carbohydrates, and iron, the precise nutrients required to reverse acute physical and psychological exhaustion. The angel did not bring Elijah meat. The angel brought him what we now understand as an optimal recovery meal. Lentils deliver 18 grams of protein per cooked cup, more than 3 eggs, more than a serving of Greek yogurt, comparable to a medium chicken breast. But the specific amino acid profile of lentils includes unusually high levels of leucine, the amino acid that functions as the primary trigger for muscle protein synthesis. When leucine levels in the bloodstream cross a threshold, the body signals the production of new muscle protein. Lentils cross that threshold. They also contain roughly 6 milligrams of iron per cup, approximately 30% of the average daily requirement, in a form that becomes more bioavailable when consumed alongside vitamin C. Add a squeeze of lemon or a handful of tomatoes to your lentil preparation, and you are practicing a nutrient synergy. The preparation is simple. Red lentils dissolve into a creamy, warming soup in 20 minutes without soaking. Brown and green lentils hold their shape after 30 minutes and work in salads and grain bowls. Never boil lentils at a rolling boil for extended periods. This degrades the protein structure and produces a mushy texture that signals overcooking. Simmer gently, taste at 25 minutes, and stop before the texture collapses. Elijah ate, drank, and then rose and walked 40 days to Horeb. That is a description of complete restoration from complete depletion. The researchers didn't need to tell the ancient world what lentils could do. The ancient world showed them. If this kind of ancient knowledge resonates with you, the places where scripture and science arrive at the same truth, because what's coming next goes even deeper. Number 6. Chickpeas. 7,000 years of human strength. The book of 2 Samuel records a moment of profound generosity after David's retreat from Jerusalem. Barzillai and others brought supplies to the exhausted king and his followers, and among those supplies were parched grain, beans, and lentils. Chickpeas would have been among the beans in that provision. They were that foundational to survival nutrition in the ancient Near East. Archaeological evidence from Jericho dates chickpea cultivation to approximately 7,500 BCE, making them one of the earliest domesticated crops in human history. They fed the builders of the early Islamic caliphates, the armies of the Byzantine Empire, and the agricultural communities of the Indus Valley civilization. 3 cultures, 2 continents, 0 overlap in religious tradition, all arriving independently at the same conclusion about the same bean. 1 cooked cup of chickpeas delivers approximately 15 grams of protein with a fiber content of 12 grams. The fiber matters more than most people realize in the context of protein. Dietary fiber feeds the gut microbiome, which in turn produces short-chain fatty acids that regulate inflammation throughout the body, including the muscle inflammation that follows intense physical work. A body with a healthy microbiome recovers faster. Chickpeas build the microbiome while simultaneously delivering the protein. Chickpeas also contain a notably high concentration of choline, a nutrient most people associate with eggs, which supports acetylcholine production. Acetylcholine is the neurotransmitter that carries signals from nerves to muscles. For anyone engaged in physical training, adequate choline is as important as adequate protein. For maximum protein bioavailability, soak dried chickpeas for 12 hours, discard the soaking water, and cook in fresh water until just tender, approximately 90 minutes at a gentle simmer. The soaking process reduces phytic acid by up to 40%, meaningfully improving mineral and protein absorption. Roast the cooked dried chickpeas at 200 degrees Celsius for 25 minutes with olive oil and sea salt for a snack that delivers 9 grams of protein per half cup serving, with a texture that satisfies in a way no protein bar ever quite manages. 7,000 years of human cultivation is not coincidence. It's a field trial more comprehensive than any clinical study. Number 5. Hemp seeds. The complete protein that history hid in plain sight. Hemp appears in Chinese agricultural records as early as 2700 BCE, documented in the Pharmacopoeia, attributed to Emperor Shen Nong, as a plant of both nutritional and medicinal value. Ancient Scythian peoples, the nomadic horse warriors described by Herodotus, carried hemp seeds as a primary travel food, much as modern endurance athletes now carry nut butters. The Viking Age saw hemp seeds used as both a food source and a crop for rope and sailcloth. Civilizations with nothing in common culturally found the same uses independently. 3 tablespoons of hemp seeds deliver approximately 10 grams of complete protein. Complete means all 9 essential amino acids, including methionine and cysteine, which are typically the limiting amino acids in plant proteins. The proteins in hemp seeds are primarily edestin and albumin, two globular proteins with a molecular structure that human digestive enzymes break down efficiently. Studies evaluating hemp protein digestibility have reported scores comparable to egg white and significantly higher than many other plant sources. Hemp also delivers an omega-6 to omega-3 fatty acid ratio of approximately 3 to 1, the ratio some researchers consider optimal. Muscle recovery is fundamentally an inflammatory process. Too much inflammation impairs it. The right fatty acid environment modulates it. Hemp seeds require no cooking and no preparation beyond opening the bag. Add 3 tablespoons to oatmeal, blend into smoothies, press into a crust for baked fish, or stir into yogurt. They have a mild, slightly nutty flavor and a soft texture that disappears into most foods without announcing itself. Store in the refrigerator after opening. The omega-3 content makes them susceptible to oxidation at room temperature over time. The stigma attached to hemp for decades had nothing to do with its nutritional profile. The nutritional profile never changed. It was exceptional the entire time. Number 4. Pumpkin seeds. The mineral protein. Pumpkin cultivation in Mesoamerica dates back approximately 10,000 years, making the cucurbit family among the oldest cultivated food plants in the human record. In the Torah and in Jonah's narrative, gourd plants provided shade and shelter. The cultural association between these plants and care, provision and restoration runs deep across multiple traditions. In Native American agricultural traditions, pumpkin seeds were dried and stored as a primary protein and fat source. 1 ounce of pumpkin seeds delivers approximately 9 grams of protein, more than the same weight of ground beef. But the mineral profile is where pumpkin seeds become genuinely remarkable. They are one of the most concentrated natural sources of magnesium available in any food, with 1 ounce providing approximately 40% of the daily recommended intake. Magnesium is required for over 300 enzymatic reactions in the human body, including every step of protein synthesis. Without adequate magnesium, the body cannot efficiently use protein from any source, animal or plant. Studies estimate that up to 50% of adults in developed nations are deficient in magnesium without knowing it. The muscle cramps, the poor sleep, the fatigue that many people attribute to aging are frequently magnesium deficiency presenting itself. Pumpkin seeds also supply significant zinc, critical for testosterone production, immune function, and the cellular repair processes that follow exercise. A zinc-deficient body is a body that recovers slowly from everything. For preparation, lightly toast raw pumpkin seeds in a dry skillet over medium heat for 3 to 5 minutes, stirring constantly until they puff slightly and develop a light golden color. The heat drives off surface moisture and activates a light nutty flavor without degrading the fat-soluble nutrients. Season with sea salt only after removing from heat. Certain heirloom pumpkin varieties, Styrian, Lady Godiva, and other hull-less types, produce seeds without the tough outer shell, which means you go directly from garden to table with zero processing barrier. Most people carve pumpkins every autumn and throw the seeds into the compost. They discard one of the most mineral-dense protein sources available for seasonal decoration. The ancients stored these seeds carefully through winter because they understood value. The modern world is still learning. Number 3. Moringa. The tree that feeds where nothing else will grow. The Talmud references the ben tree, almost certainly Moringa, as a plant whose properties were considered extraordinary, associated with the mystical river. Arabic medical tradition was more direct. Ibn al-Baytar, the 13th century Andalusian botanist, documented Moringa in detail as a plant of remarkable sustaining power used across North Africa, the Middle East, and South Asia. Ayurvedic tradition classified Moringa as a rasayana, a category of herbs associated with longevity, strength, and the reversal of bodily depletion. Across sub-Saharan Africa, South Asia, and Southeast Asia, cultures with no ancient contact, Moringa arrived at the same designation, the tree you plant when you need to ensure that people do not starve. 100 grams of dried Moringa leaf powder contains approximately 27 grams of complete protein, with all 9 essential amino acids. Gram for gram, the dried leaves deliver roughly twice the protein of yogurt. They also contain 4 times the calcium of milk, 3 times the potassium of bananas, and 7 times the vitamin C of oranges, all from one plant. International health organizations have deployed Moringa in acute malnutrition programs specifically because its combination of complete protein with micronutrients addresses multiple deficiencies simultaneously in a single food source. The specific compounds include isothiocyanates, anti-inflammatory agents that laboratory research is actively investigating for their effects on inflammatory pathways, and a glucosinolate called glucomoringin that converts to moringin upon digestion, with preliminary studies suggesting antimicrobial and antioxidant activity. Moringa leaf powder integrates easily into any preparation. 1 teaspoon stirred into warm water or broth, not boiling, because temperatures above 70 degrees Celsius degrade the vitamin C content measurably, delivers roughly 3 grams of protein along with a comprehensive micronutrient profile. The flavor is mild and slightly grassy. Fresh leaves can be added to soups after cooking, used in salads, or dried and ground at home. A moringa tree planted in a warm climate grows up to 15 feet in its first year and can be harvested multiple times per season. The miracle tree earned the name not from legend. It earned it from the observable fact that communities planted it when conventional agriculture failed and the people did not starve. That is a nutritional credential more compelling than any clinical abstract. Number 2. Spirulina. 60% protein. NASA studied it. Empires harvested it. The Book of Exodus describes the Israelites in the wilderness, subsisting on manna, a substance the text describes as appearing on the ground each morning, small and white, gathering from the surface of water or ground. Scholars have proposed various natural explanations. Some have noted that spirulina and related cyanobacteria can form visible mats on mineral-rich water surfaces, particularly around alkaline lakes, and that sun-dried cyanobacterial cakes were indeed a documented food source among ancient desert-adjacent cultures. Whether or not spirulina was the literal manna is a theological question this channel is not positioned to answer. That spirulina has fed communities near nutrient-poor desert environments for thousands of years is documented history. The Aztecs harvested spirulina from Lake Texcoco and pressed it into dried cakes called tequitlatl, sold in markets alongside corn and beans as a primary protein source. The Kanembu people around Lake Chad in North Africa have harvested and dried spirulina for centuries, consuming it as daihe, a food still eaten today. 2 cultures on 2 continents, separated by an ocean, with no recorded contact, independently developed harvesting and preservation methods for the same microorganism. That convergence pattern is not coincidence. Spirulina is approximately 60 to 70% complete protein by dry weight. Beef is approximately 26%. Chicken is approximately 31%. Spirulina does not merely compete with animal proteins. It nearly triples them by proportion. 2 tablespoons of spirulina powder deliver approximately 8 grams of highly bioavailable protein along with iron, B vitamins, beta-carotene, and phycocyanin, the blue-green pigment that is the subject of active research for its antioxidant and anti-inflammatory properties. Studies suggest that phycocyanin inhibits the production of certain pro-inflammatory prostaglandins, with results researchers consider worth further clinical investigation. NASA's interest in spirulina for long-duration space missions stems from its extraordinary ratio of nutrition density. When cargo weight determines survival, spirulina's nutritional output per gram is difficult to match with any other food source. Integrate spirulina gradually. Begin with 1 teaspoon in cold water, citrus juice, or a smoothie. The flavor is distinctly oceanic and assertive. Cold preparation is superior because heat above 60 degrees Celsius begins to degrade the phycocyanin content. Masking in fruit smoothies is a legitimate strategy. After 2 weeks, most people find the taste unremarkable. You can cultivate spirulina at home in transparent tanks exposed to sunlight with minimal equipment. It doubles its biomass in approximately 3 to 5 days under optimal conditions. This is a renewable protein source that never sleeps, never spoils within its growth medium, and asks nothing but light, water, and a small amount of mineral nutrient solution. The ancient world found this protein on the surface of desert lakes and understood immediately what it was. Not superstition. Not ceremony. Survival intelligence. Number 1. The black soybean. The ancient legume scripture knew that modern nutrition has almost entirely forgotten. Everyone who follows plant-based nutrition has heard of soybeans. Yellow soybeans, edamame, tofu, tempeh, these are the familiar. What almost no one in the Western world knows is that the black-seeded variety of Glycine max, the black soybean, was the original cultivated form in ancient East Asia, and that the two varieties differ meaningfully in their phytochemical profile in ways that matter clinically. The Book of Ezekiel, chapter 4 again, the nutritional chapter of the Hebrew Bible, lists the ingredients for the prophet's survival bread. Some translations list fitches or field crops that ancient translators struggled to identify precisely because the original Hebrew terms referred to crops specific to the Levantine agricultural tradition. What we know with certainty is that bean and legume cultivation was central to every ancient food system, and that the most prized varieties were those with the deepest pigment, because in every traditional food culture, color signaled density of medicinal value. In traditional Chinese medicine, black soybeans were categorized separately from yellow soybeans precisely because practitioners observed different therapeutic effects. Shennong's Pharmacopoeia, attributed to China's mythical first emperor, describes black soybeans as tonifying for the kidneys and beneficial for what was understood as vital essence, a concept that maps closely onto what we now call mitochondrial energy production. Black soybeans deliver approximately 29 grams of protein per cooked cup, comparable to a 4-ounce chicken breast. The protein is complete. But the distinction from yellow soybeans is in the anthocyanin content. The black seed coat of the black soybean is dense with cyanidin 3-glucoside, the same anthocyanin that makes blueberries nutritionally prestigious. Research published in peer-reviewed food science journals has found that black soybean anthocyanins demonstrate measurable antioxidant activity in laboratory studies and that regular consumption is associated with markers of improved metabolic health. The results are consistent enough to sustain continued scientific investigation. The specific preparation advantage of black soybeans over yellow is that their anthocyanins are more stable to moderate heat than many other anthocyanin sources. Simmer gently for 90 minutes after a 12-hour soak, and the seed coat's pigment disperses into the cooking liquid, which turns a deep purple red. That liquid is not waste. It contains meaningful concentrations of the water-soluble pigments. Save it. Use it as a broth base. Traditional Chinese preparations retain that liquid specifically as a medicinal component. Black soybeans can be eaten as a cooked bean, fermented into a miso-like paste, or dried and roasted for a snack, delivering roughly 11 grams of protein per half cup. Traditional Japanese preparations include kuromame, black soybeans simmered slowly with soy sauce and a small amount of sweetener, eaten as a ceremonial food during New Year's celebrations, specifically for their association with health and longevity. Most people have never seen a black soybean at their grocery store. They are not a new food. They are an ancient food that industrial agriculture replaced with a higher yield yellow variety that is easier to process into oil and meal. What was lost in that substitution was the anthocyanin profile, the part that traditional cultures considered the valuable part. The counterintuitive truth at the top of this list is this: the most protein-dense complete plant source that most people have never encountered isn't exotic, isn't expensive, isn't found only in specialty health stores. It's a bean. A black bean that ancient Chinese physicians considered medicine, that traditional Japanese families elevated to ceremony, that food scientists are now examining again with the tools of modern biochemistry and finding that the traditional practitioners were not guessing. They were observing. Carefully. Over generations. What processing destroyed that ancient hands preserved? There is one thread that runs through every entry in this countdown. It is not just protein content. It is not just antiquity. It is this: every one of these plants contains bioactive compounds that are chemically fragile. Sulforaphane activates only when cellular walls are disrupted and then given time before heat is applied. Phycocyanin in spirulina degrades above 60 degrees Celsius. Anthocyanins in black soybeans dissolve into water that most cooks pour down the drain. Myrosinase in cruciferous vegetables is destroyed by boiling. Cynarin in artichokes leaches into cooking water that never reaches the table. The industrial food system optimizes for yield, shelf stability, transportability, and visual uniformity. It does not optimize for enzymatic activation windows or heat-sensitive phytochemical preservation. The result is that the nutritional gap between a traditionally prepared plant food and its industrial equivalent. This is what every ancient food tradition understood in practice, even without knowing the chemistry. Traditional preparation methods, the specific temperatures, the fermentation periods, the soaking protocols, the sequencing of preparation steps, were not arbitrary customs. They were empirically derived protocols for preserving compounds that experience taught were important, even when no one could name those compounds yet. Modern nutrition is largely confirming what traditional cultures preserved through practice. The question worth carrying with you after this video is not simply what to eat, but how much of the nutritional value in what you already eat has been quietly removed before it ever reached your plate. That question has answers. And they begin, as they usually do, with what people were doing long before there were labels to read. If this video helped you see something you hadn't seen before, hit like and share it with someone in your life who thinks protein only comes with a butcher's receipt. Subscribe for more of this kind of deep dive, and drop a comment below telling me which of these plants surprised you most. I read every one. See you in the next video.